Mr. Mohale, who's also Vice-Chancellor at the University of the Free State, joins us now. Thank you so much for your time this evening. And you join us on quite an interesting day when we've heard from the President himself in Parliament, I think in many ways trying to reassure us that rebuilding can and will be done, but also the news that we have to go full steam ahead into a local election next month. I know that you watched his address in Parliament, his Q&A session. What did you make of it? Did you find anything reassuring for business in particular?
Sally, thank you so much for having me. Let me start by saying I had my second jab on Monday, the 23rd of August. The first one was 11th of July. Therefore, if you love life as much as I do, you and I will make sure that we are vaccinated, and by so doing help the other 40 million South Africans to make sure that they are vaccinated. Sally, we have to move beyond platitudes and talks. This ANC-led government for 27 years has been telling us a good story, but not acting, not doing, not executing, not delivery. Now we hold the world record on a number of issues that we don't want, that we didn't invite. Therefore, if I'm the CEO, it's not sufficient that I tell my company that this is the extent of the problem, this is the width of the mess. We need to give direction, and it's up to you as the CEO to provide that leadership. For instance, today we are the most and highest unemployment levels in the country at 44.4%. That's what the president said. World record. The most unequal society with a Gini coefficient of 0.6. We also have the highest number of small and medium enterprises failures in the world. The lowest level of education, and yet we spend 10 times more than most African compatriots. So 27 years into democracy, to hear that today the CEO of City Power comes from Eskom, and that board says, but we didn't know that he was fired from Eskom for malfeasance and impropriety. And yet we know for the last 40 years at least, if not 150 years, you can't get a C-suite job without at least 4 checks done on you. Credit, criminal, but reference check from your previous employer, but also qualifications check. So that when you say you've got an MBA, they go to the university and say, did this person register? Because we've got lots of people masquerading as doctors today and they don't have the PhDs.
Yeah, I can hear your frustration, and it absolutely comes through in the article you wrote. And one of the things you say is that business is a critical partner, but it must be taken more seriously. Explain who is not taking you seriously and how it's manifesting practically.
So first, business has been making a number of suggestions because you see, business employs pre-COVID 13.5 million people, government 2.3 million people. So during COVID, we lose 3.2 million jobs, but we create 800,000. Net, we have lost 2.2 million people. That's 10 million people that now are unable to eat. But our biggest risk is youth unemployment. It was 74.7%. Now it has gone up to 74.9%. Number of unemployed, 11.9 million people. Or 12 million people are not employed. We've got 17 million people on social security, and yet only 16 million that are gainfully employed. You can see that this powder keg, this tinderbox, that led to the 2 weeks in July, is about to go off again because not only are we expecting it, we are actually inviting it. Therefore, business is the only one of the social partners that can spell this word project management. How to deliver mega projects on budget, on time, and in full. And yet we know government, every mega project from the new multi-product pipeline quadrupled the cost, 3 times the time. Kusile Midupi, 14 years later, we are still not getting the electricity that we paid for. That has cost us 3 times what it should have cost us. And as business, it's frustrating because, you know, energy is the 4th means of production. And we make simple suggestions to say, Mr. President, we'll help you to bring investment. But we want only 2 things, regulatory certainty and policy stability. And what do? They give us exactly the opposite. We say, Mr. President, you know what drives share price is rumor and speculation. So what will drive the message that South Africa is open for business is when you act. So you need to take the top state capture miscreants to jail. People can't steal 1.5 trillion of our money in 5 years and get away with it. They can't continue to siphon off 20 billion a year every year just to the two Zupta families, and there's no consequence management. We've been talking about digital migration and auctioning the spectrum. For 10 years, 5 ministers later, we are where we are, we still don't have a digital spectrum. Now we have to feed these poor people in our own companies. We get looted during the 2 weeks in July. The very next day, we send 127,000 tons of food to the people of KwaZulu-Natal, who's just banned 11 warehouses and 8 factories.
So talk to me. You say that business needs just two things: regulatory certainty and policy stability. You also say in your article that you are very happy to make bold decisions as business, as the business community, but so too must political leadership. Give me an example of a bold decision that you think the president should be making right now that he isn't. And if he isn't, why isn't he making the bold decisions?
So first of all, we know that we need to roll out the vaccines as per the president's target of 67% in January, which means we must inoculate at a rate of 100,000 a day, every day in January. Had we done that, it would have taken us 400 days or 13.3 months. We start late, we are behind, and we don't act like people who are already behind. We should today be vaccinating at a rate of 350,000 to 400,000 a day, so that we get this herd immunity by the end of this year. So by the 27th of January, when you look at vaccine doses administered, and we compare ourselves only with our BRICS counterparts, because we chose to be part of that economic bloc. Brazil was already on 579,000, Russia on 800,000.
I mean, I hear you, but where's the bold decision that the president didn't make? Because we know that the delay was actually, to a certain extent, out of our hands, because it was the worrying news about AstraZeneca that it might not act against the beta variant, which had just been identified in South Africa. Yes, I hear what you're saying, that people should have moved quicker, perhaps in government, in health department circles. But where is the lack of bold decision? What bold decision right now should the president be making that you really wish he would, that he isn't?
We offered to government to say, to roll out these vaccines, give the 400,000 vaccines to the Minerals Council of Southern Africa, the old Chamber of Mines. Because at level 5, they continue to work. They know how to test, how to screen, and they can do this in 3 months. We said to business, you can use our premises. Discovery is probably the most well-class vaccination center we've got. And it wasn't taken up. We said to the government, bring down the level of debt. No, it's not just too slow. They are putting their arms around it, and yet they know they don't have the abilities and capabilities. I mean, there are companies here that employ 150,000 people. If you give them their vaccine, they will go ahead. Discovery has 2 million people. Just give it to them. They must see to it. But, oh no, as government to say, no, we want to do it and we want to accredit you. And yet the standards in the private sector is probably 10 times higher than in public institutions. Sally?
Yeah, I hear you. So what should the president be doing? If you could ask him to do one thing, one bold thing, what would it be? What specific thing would it be? It doesn't have to be around vaccines. It could be around business regulations. But what is the one decision that you hear consistently from within business that you feel the president is not making?
Reduce the size of your cabinet, because that's your decision. It's not the ANC's decision. To send a message that we're open for business. Reduce the government debt, because it's like an albatross around our neck. Reduce the public sector wage bill. That's bold, because Labour is a tripartite alliance. Fix the 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, because that's how the apartheid government used it, not just as a crucible for votes, but to create skills, to address the poor Afrikaner problem. By 1972, there was not a single poor Afrikaner, because they set themselves a target, they did it.
I have to ask you this. You started by saying you've got both your vaccines, so am I, and I'm completely delighted about it. Do you, as Business Unity South Africa, and do you personally support businesses making COVID-19 vaccines mandatory in the workplace?
You see, our constitution is the best in the world because it says you've got a right even to protest as long as your right does not impinge on the right of others. So with the pandemic, we're trying to do three things. One, save lives. Number two, preserve livelihoods. Number three, break the link between coronavirus cases and deaths. And the only way you can do that is vaccination. So if you love your partner, your significant other, your key relationships, if you love your colleagues, if you love your country, you'll help us to achieve 40 million people, which is the entire adult population, to be vaccinated before the end of this year. So we need to do whatever we can. Pull out the train Bophelo paper, pull out mobile ambulances. Let us use the refrigerated trucks of private companies, of Imperial, of the Bidvest Group Limited, so that we show that we are serious, because this thing is decimating our people. We are approaching 90,000 deaths, 2.5 million people infected and affected. And yet we know that vaccine rollout has always been a race, because the country that can say we have defeated and rooted out this virus, like New Zealand, will reap the pent-up global tourism demand. Tourism matters to us because it's 10.2 million people that have visited. That's 10% of the national GDP.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Tourism is such a critical industry for us. Thank you so much for chatting to us this Friday evening. Bonang Mohale, wonderful to chat to you. And he, of course, is the newly elected president of Business Unity South Africa.